The Galactic Empire had records of everything. Every star, every planet, every creature that had ever dared to look up at the sky and dream of reaching it. They had catalogs that stretched back 10,000 years. They had databases so large that even their best machines needed hours to search through them. They had spies in every corner of the known galaxy, and they were very, very proud of all of this. So when a new signal appeared on the edge of Sector 7, the Empire noticed it immediately. A small blue and white planet, third from its star, sitting quietly in an unremarkable solar system. The signal was odd. It was not just a pulse or a natural echo from a dying sun. It was structured. It had patterns. It repeated in ways that natural things do not repeat. Admiral Vorten Kesh sat in his chair on the bridge of the Imperial flagship, the Eternal Rule, and stared at the report his science officer had placed in front of him. He was a tall being, gray-skinned and four-armed, with golden eyes that had seen 100 wars. He had served the Empire for 60 years. He had never seen a report like this one. "Say that again," he said, his voice low and flat. His science officer, a young female named Preece, stood straight and kept her eyes forward. "The signal originates from a Class M planet in Sector 7, Admiral. It appears to be a deliberate broadcast, multiple frequencies, structured data, and what our translators believe are mathematical sequences." "And the planet?" Vorten asked. He already had a feeling he knew the answer, but he wanted to hear it. Pre hesitated. That was unusual. Science officers did not hesitate. "The planet, Admiral, is not in our records." Silence fell across the bridge. 30 officers, all of them experienced, all of them loyal to the Empire, turned slowly to look at the science officer. Someone near the back of the room made a small, involuntary sound, quickly cut off. "Not in our records," Vorten repeated. "No, Admiral. We have searched 3 times. The planet exists. The signal is real. But there is no entry for this world in any Imperial database going back 6,000 years. Vorten leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. Outside the great windows of the bridge, stars drifted slowly past. The Eternal Rule was a massive ship, 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and shields and all the power that 10,000 years of Imperial science could create. And yet, looking at that little blue planet on the display screen, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt uneasy. He pushed the feeling away. He was Admiral Vorten Kesh. Unease was for lesser beings. "Pull up every scan we have of Sector 7 for the past 200 years, he ordered. "Find out how this planet was missed. Someone made an error. Find them." "Yes, Admiral." But even as he said this, Vorten knew it was not an error. The Empire did not make errors. Not in the records. Not in the catalogs. The catalogs were sacred. Every planet, every moon, every rock large enough to be worth noting, had been logged, tagged, and filed. For a world this size, this close to a stable star, to be missing from those records was not an error. It was impossible. He looked at the planet again. Small blue-white sphere, mostly water. 1 large moon. Thin rings of debris in high orbit, which looked like the remnants of early, primitive space travel. The atmosphere readings were remarkable. Oxygen-nitrogen mix, warm, active, teeming with what the sensors said was biological life in extraordinary variety. "How old are those signals?" he asked. "The oldest ones we can detect are roughly 200 years old, Admiral, but they grow stronger and more complex over time. The most recent transmissions include what appears to be sophisticated digital imagery, audio recordings, and something our computers are still trying to classify." 200 years, Vorten said quietly. "They have only been transmitting for 200 years? That is what the data suggests, Admiral." He tapped his lower left hand against his armrest. 200 years. In Imperial terms, that was nothing. A blink, a heartbeat. Most species the Empire had encountered had been transmitting for thousands of years before contact was made. To have a world broadcasting for only 2 centuries meant one thing. They were young. Whatever lived on that little blue planet was very, very new to space. That should have made him feel better. It did not. "Send a probe," he ordered. "Close approach. I want full biological and technological assessment." "At once, Admiral." The probe took 3 days to reach the planet. 3 days in which Vorton read everything his team could find about the Sector 7 region. It was, as his science officer had said, remarkably empty in the records. A few asteroid fields, a pair of dead moons around a gas giant, some old survey notes from centuries ago that mentioned nothing remarkable. The kind of sector that fell through the gaps, the kind of sector no one had thought worth a second look. When the probe data came back, the bridge was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. The creatures on the planet were bipedal, warm-blooded, soft-skinned, mostly hairless, with 2 eyes and 2 arms and 2 legs, and large, complicated brains. They were not particularly strong, not particularly fast, not particularly large. By any measure the Empire used to assess a species, they seemed unremarkable in every physical way. But their technology. "This cannot be right," said Pre, staring at the numbers. Her voice had lost some of its composure. "Admiral, this cannot be right." "Show me," Vorton said. The display lit up. Images from the probe. Cities. Great sprawling networks of them, glowing at night like scattered jewels. Roads connecting everything to everything. Machines moving through the air, through the water, across the ground. And in orbit, dozens of stations, some small, some the size of small moons. And ships, many ships. Warships. Vorton leaned forward. "How many?" "Within the home system alone, Admiral, our probe counted over 4,000 vessels of warship class or larger. There are also deep space installations at several points in the outer system, and we detected what appear to be jump points. Admiral, they have faster-than-light travel." Vorton was quiet. "They have only been transmitting for 200 years, he said slowly. "Yes, Admiral. They have faster-than-light travel." "Yes, Admiral. And 4,000 warships in their home system. At minimum, Admiral. There may be more. The probe was not able to scan the far side of the planet's star." Another long silence. Someone coughed. No one looked at anyone else. Vorton stood up from his chair. It was a thing he rarely did during a briefing. He walked to the display and looked at the planet, really looked at it. Blue and white and peaceful looking from this distance. Clouds moving across the surface. Light from the star playing off the oceans. "What are they called?" he asked. "They call their planet Earth, Admiral, and they call themselves humans." "Humans," he repeated. The word felt strange in his mouth. "And where have they been all this time? How has no one found them? How has no one reported them?" No one had an answer. Vorton returned to his chair. He had a decision to make, and he needed to make it carefully. The Empire's protocol for newly discovered species was clear. If the species was primitive, you offered them a place in the Empire as a subject world. If the species was advanced but weaker than the Empire, you offered them the same, with less patience. And if the species was advanced and strong, well, that was a different conversation. The Empire had not met a species it could not eventually absorb or defeat. That was not arrogance. That was history. 10,000 years of it. "Send a message," Vorton said. "Standard first contact protocol. Tell these humans that they have been noticed by the Galactic Empire, and that we are sending a delegation to discuss the terms of their integration." "And if they do not respond well?" Pre asked. Then she added quickly, "Forgive me, Admiral." "No," Vorton said. "It is a fair question." He looked at the planet one more time. "If they do not respond well, we will remind them how large the Empire is." The message was sent. The humans responded in 11 minutes. 11 minutes. The distance between the Eternal Rule and the planet should have meant a response time of at least an hour, assuming the humans had some form of fast signal technology. 11 minutes was not a communication lag. 11 minutes meant they had already been watching, already knew the Empire was there, already had something prepared. Vorton read the response twice before he spoke. It was polite, careful, written in clean, precise Imperial standard, which meant they had been studying Imperial transmissions long enough to learn the language. It thanked the Empire for making contact. It said that the humans were familiar with the Empire, having monitored Imperial communications for some decades. It said that the humans were not seeking integration at this time. It said, and here Vorton stopped and read the line 3 times. It said that if the Empire's fleet moved closer, the humans would take it as a hostile action and respond accordingly. They know who we are, Pri said, her voice very quiet. They have been watching us for decades, Vorton said. He set the message down. And they are not afraid. That was the part that stayed with him. Any species that had been watching the Empire long enough to learn its language knew what the Empire was capable of, what it had done to worlds that refused integration, what happened to civilizations that said no. And these humans had said no, politely, calmly, as if they had expected this conversation, and decided long ago how it would go. Get me high command, Vorton said. I need to make a report. And I need more ships. He paused, looking at the blue planet on the screen. Many more ships. Back on Earth, in a quiet room deep underground, a woman named General Yara Ose sat at a table with 20 other people and looked at the same communication the Empire had sent. She was a short woman with dark skin and close-cropped gray hair, and she had the look of someone who had spent a great many years thinking very hard about very difficult problems. Well, she said after a long moment, that took them longer than we expected. 43 years, said the man across from her. Commander Dao Lin, head of Earth's Deep Space Intelligence Division. He was reading through his own datapad, his face calm. We first detected their long-range probes 43 years ago. I thought they would come sooner. They didn't know we were here, Yara said. They still don't fully understand what they've found. No, Dao Lin agreed. They don't. Yara looked at the star map on the wall of the room. The Empire was marked on it, a vast sweep of territory covering most of the known galaxy. Earth was a small dot, far from the center, almost on the edge. Easy to miss, easy to overlook. They had spent 50 years making sure of that. How long do we have, she asked, before they send a real fleet? Dao Lin thought about it. 3 months, maybe 4. They'll want to gather their forces, get authorization from the Imperial Senate, draw up the formal documents. They love their documents. 3 months, Yara said. She nodded slowly. That's enough. Give the order. Begin Phase 3. Somewhere in the dark of space, far from any star the Empire was watching, human ships were moving. They had been moving for years, quiet and dark and patient, spreading out to positions the Empire did not know existed, waiting for exactly this moment. The Empire thought it had found a new planet to add to its collection. It had no idea what it had actually found. The Imperial Senate took exactly 19 days to authorize a military response. Admiral Vortan Kesh had expected it to take longer. The Senate liked to argue. It liked long speeches and procedural debates, and the slow, grinding work of politics that had kept the Empire together for 10,000 years. But this time, something was different. Fear moved faster than politics. The report Vorton had sent back to the capital was classified at the highest level, seen only by the Emperor and the 12 members of the Inner Council. But even classified information had a way of leaking, in fragments, in whispers, in the nervous behavior of people who knew something they wished they did not know. Within a week of Vortan's report, the entire capital world was buzzing with rumor. A new species, unregistered, already advanced, already watching, already armed. The Senate voted for military action in one of the shortest sessions in Imperial history. Vorton was given command of the 7th Grand Fleet, which was the kind of fleet usually reserved for ending civilizations that had made the serious mistake of declaring war on the Empire. 240 warships, 3 super dreadnoughts, which were ships so large that smaller planets used to track their movements as a second moon, 40 carrier ships, each holding hundreds of fighter craft, supply ships, hospital ships, a dozen specialized vessels carrying the Empire's most powerful weapons, the kind of fleet that had not been assembled in over a century. The Senate wants this handled quietly, said Grand Admiral Sileth, Vorton's superior, and the only person in the Empire whose voice he was required to obey. She was ancient, her gray skin darkened with age to something close to black, her golden eyes rimmed with white. She had seen more wars than Vortan had years in his life. Quietly, she repeated, and quickly, the Emperor does not want this situation to last long. It is embarrassing. Embarrassing, Vortan said carefully. A species this capable, sitting in our records gap for over a century. Yes, Vortan, deeply embarrassing. Someone will answer for it, once the humans are no longer a concern. For now, you have everything you need. Go. Be decisive. Be fast. And if they resist? Seleth's old eyes did not change. Then the galaxy will learn what happens to species that resist. Vorton assembled his fleet and began the journey to Sector 7. It took 2 months. During those 2 months, he studied everything his intelligence teams had gathered on the humans. He read reports until he had memorized them. He watched the visual recordings from the probe dozens of times. He had his translators work around the clock on human communications, and he sat with them and listened to the results. Humans were a strange species. He had dealt with hundreds of species in his career. Most of them, when threatened, went through predictable stages: denial, anger, bargaining, eventually, acceptance. The smart ones skipped the middle stages and went straight to acceptance. The foolish ones fought briefly and were absorbed. Humans did not seem to be going through any of those stages. Their public communications, which they broadcast openly, and which his translators monitored constantly, were calm. There were news reports about the Imperial contact. There were discussions and debates. There were experts on what they called exopol, extraplanetary politics, speaking on their visual broadcast systems with great confidence and detail. They talked about the Empire. They talked about its history, its tactics, its weaknesses. They talked about it the way his military academy instructors had talked about ancient battles, analytically, without panic. Without panic. He found a recording of one of their experts, a thin, older man with gray hair and sharp eyes, speaking on one of their large broadcast programs. The man was remarkably relaxed. He sat across from an interviewer and spoke clearly. The translation ran underneath the image. The Empire has never encountered a species that prepared for them. Every civilization they've absorbed or destroyed had no idea they were coming. We had 40 years of warning. That is a very different situation. You sound confident, the interviewer said. I am realistic, the man said. The Empire is very powerful, but power and preparedness are two different things. And humans are very, very good at preparing. Vorton watched that clip 7 times. He could not fully explain why it bothered him so much. He ordered his fleet to approach Sector 7 at battle readiness. He wanted everything active, everything ready, the moment they arrived. On Earth, General Yara Osei was not sleeping much, not because she was afraid, but because there was a great deal to do, and sleeping felt like a poor use of the time available to her. She moved through the long corridors of the Global Defense Command, a facility built 6 decades ago, deep enough underground that even an orbital bombardment would take a long time to reach it, and she answered questions and gave orders, and read reports, and drank more coffee than was probably healthy. Earth's defense network had been in quiet development for almost 100 years, not because humans had always known the Empire was coming, but because humans, as a rule, were the sort of species that looked at a universe full of strange things and thought, we should probably be ready for most of them. The first generation of Earth's space program had been about exploration and wonder. The second generation had been about economics, mining the asteroid belt, building habitats in orbit, learning how to live in space. But the third generation, the one that had grown up knowing there were other intelligent species out there, because the signals were right there, detectable by anyone with the right equipment, that generation had been more serious. They had listened, quietly, patiently. They had cracked the Imperial communication codes in 15 years, which was remarkable given that the Empire used codes it considered unbreakable. They had watched the Empire absorb 12 civilizations in real time. They had watched what happened to species that were caught unprepared. Then they had gone to work. Phase 3 is complete, Commander Dao Lin said, appearing at Yara's side with a datapad. He had the focused, slightly smudged look of someone who had also not slept in several days. All forward positions are in place. The relay network is active and tested. The deep space platforms are confirmed operational. And the fleet? Yara asked. Spread across 6 staging points, as planned. They won't see us coming unless we want them to. Yara stopped walking and looked at a map on the wall. A 3-dimensional display of the surrounding space, stretching out for light years in every direction. The Empire's fleet was marked on it, a massive cluster of red dots, moving steadily toward the yellow dot that represented Sol. Earth's sun. 240 ships. She had known this was coming. She had planned for it, but even she could feel the weight of it. "How many do we have?" she asked. "Ready and deployed?" 1,200 combat vessels, another 400 support and specialized. The automated platforms add another 600 effective combat equivalents. And the new systems? The ones from the Ares program? Dao Lin allowed himself a very small smile. Online, tested. And I promise you, Admiral Kesh has nothing in those records that looks anything like them. Yara turned back to the map. 240 Imperial ships, against 1,200 human vessels and 600 platforms. On paper, the numbers favored Earth, but the Empire's ships were old, proven, battle-hardened designs. Their weapons were powerful and well understood. Their commanders were experienced. Their tactics had worked on 100 worlds. The question was whether those tactics would work on a species that had spent decades specifically studying them. "Tell the fleet to stand by," Yara said. "Full communication silence. No signals, no pulses, nothing. I want them to see an empty system when they arrive." "Understood." "And Dao Lin, get me a line to the colony worlds. I want Proxima, Kepler, and the Trappist stations on standby. If this goes wrong, it won't go wrong." "If it goes wrong," she said again, steady and calm, "they need to know what to do next." Dao Lin nodded. "Yes, General." He left. Yara stood alone in front of the map for a moment, looking at the 240 red dots. She had spent 40 years of her life preparing for this day. As a young officer, she had studied every battle the Empire had ever fought, every strategy they had ever used. She had read about the fall of the Cathari, the Ven Collective, the Seven Worlds Compact, and a dozen others. She had seen how the pattern worked. The Empire arrived with overwhelming force. They demanded submission. If it was refused, they began an orbital bombardment. If that did not break the will of the defenders, they landed troops. The defenders always broke, eventually, because they were always outgunned, always outnumbered, always unprepared. But there was something the Empire had never accounted for in any of those battles, something it had never encountered. A species that had chosen to be ready, a species that had read the same history. The Imperial fleet crossed into Sector 7 18 days ahead of Vortan's estimated schedule. He had pushed the fleet hard. He wanted this done. The planet appeared on his displays exactly where the probe had found it, blue and white and calm-looking against the black. His sensors showed him something that, for a moment, he did not understand. The system was empty. No ships in orbit, no defensive platforms, no weapon installations. The stations they had detected before were there, yes. The planet below had its cities, its lights, its ordinary signs of a busy civilization. But the thousands of ships the probe had counted, the fleet that should have been waiting to meet them, gone. "Where are their ships?" Vortan demanded. "We are scanning, Admiral. We cannot locate them." "They were here." The probe counted over 4,000. "We cannot locate them, Admiral." Pre's voice was tight. "I am running a full-spectrum scan. There is no military presence visible in this system." Vortan stared at the empty space around the blue planet. His hands were still on his armrests. His face was still. "Find them," he said. "They are here somewhere. They have to be." But the scans found nothing. The space around Earth was quiet, peaceful, inviting, almost. Vortan had been in enough battles to know when something felt wrong. This felt very wrong. "Battle stations," he said quietly. "All ships, battle stations, now." He was too good a soldier not to listen to the feeling in his gut. He just did not know, yet, how much he had underestimated what that feeling was trying to tell him. The Eternal Rule held its position at the edge of the Earth system for 4 hours, while Vortan waited for his sensor teams to find the human fleet. They did not find it. Every scan came back the same. The planet was there. The stations were there. The occasional small vessel, what looked like transport ships or shuttles moving between the planet and its moon, were there. But the military ships were not. At the end of the 4 hours, Vortan received a communication. It came from the planet. It was addressed to him by name, which was itself remarkable, since he had not transmitted his name. He read it once, and then handed it to Pre. Read it aloud, he said. Pre took the datapad and read, Admiral Vorton Kesh, welcome to the Sol system. We have been monitoring your approach for the past 3 months. We know the composition of your fleet, the names of your ship captains, the state of your weapons systems, and the general nature of your orders. We would like to offer you an opportunity that the Empire rarely provides to others, the chance to leave peacefully and report back that this system is not worth the cost of taking. We mean this sincerely, Admiral. This is not posturing. This is not a bluff. Please consider it carefully. You have 12 hours to decide. After 12 hours, we will assume your answer is no. The message was signed, Global Defense Command, Earth. The bridge was so quiet that Vorton could hear the soft hum of the ship's systems. He looked around at his officers. Most of them had carefully blank faces, which told him everything he needed to know about what they were thinking. They're stalling, said his tactical officer, Commander Bren, a short, broad being with red skin and a reputation for blunt thinking. They're buying time. Their fleet is somewhere, and they need time to get it in position. That is one possibility, Vorton said. It's the only logical one, Bren said. They can't actually have a fleet bigger than ours hidden in this system. We'd find it. Unless their stealth technology is better than ours, Pre said quietly. Everyone looked at her. She kept her eyes on her console, which, based on everything else we've seen, is not impossible. Vorton thought about the probe data. The probe had showed 4,000 military vessels. Now there were none. Standard stealth technology, the kind the Empire used, could hide a ship from most scans for a few hours, but not indefinitely, and not thousands of ships at once. If the humans had hidden that many ships without a trace, it meant something his mind did not want to fully accept. Their stealth is significantly better than ours, he said out loud, testing the words. No one argued with him. That was almost worse. He sent a reply to the humans. He kept it short and formal. He told them that the Galactic Empire did not negotiate from a position of threat, that the offer to leave was rejected, and that they had 24 hours to signal their unconditional surrender or face military action. He used the standard language, the kind that had preceded the fall of a dozen civilizations. It felt right and proper and correct. Then he ordered his fleet to begin a slow advance toward the planet. He had covered perhaps a quarter of the distance between his entry point and Earth's orbit when the first thing happened. 6 of his ships reported strange interference in their sensor systems. Not damage, not a weapon impact, just noise. Static where there should have been clear readings, the kind of interference that could mean a great many things, none of them good. Vorton ordered the fleet to stop. He ordered full diagnostic checks. He ordered an expanded scan of all surrounding space. The diagnostics came back clean. The scans found nothing. The interference faded after 3 minutes, as if it had never existed. Weapons test, Bren said. They're probing our sensor systems. They want to know exactly what we can and can't detect. Yes, Vorton agreed. Continue the advance. Tighten the formation. I want all ships within 2 kilometers of their neighbors. The fleet moved forward again. The second thing happened 20 minutes later. One of the carrier ships, the Third Glory, reported a detonation in its lower hull. Minor damage, no casualties. But the explosion had come from outside, not inside. Something had hit the ship. Something small, fast, and precisely targeted. The kind of precision that was not a warning shot. The kind of precision that said, we can do this to any part of any ship at any time. Contact! Several officers shouted at once. The sensors lit up. For exactly 4 seconds, a cluster of shapes appeared on the display. Close. Far too close. Inside what should have been the fleet's defensive perimeter. And then they were gone again. Vanished back into invisibility. Vorton stared at where they had been. 20 shapes. Maybe 30. Hard to count in 4 seconds. But large. The energy signatures in those 4 seconds had been large. Battle stations, he said, very quietly. Full defensive posture. I want every ship's shields at maximum, and every weapon system active. Admiral, Frakes said, and her voice had changed. The professional calm was still there, but something underneath it was different now. I'm reading residual energy signatures at 37 separate points around our fleet. The sources are not visible, but they are surrounding us. surrounding us. Vortin had been in wars. He had been in ambushes, counterattacks, last stands, and desperate fights. He had felt the cold, clear clarity of knowing a battle was about to begin, and he had never once felt his courage fail him. What he felt now was not quite courage failing. It was something more specific than that. It was the feeling of a very experienced soldier realizing, with complete certainty, that he had walked into a trap that was far more sophisticated than anything he had prepared for. "Hail them," he said. "The humans. Open a communication channel." On Earth, in the underground command center, General Yara OCE was watching the same data feed from 60 different angles. Her fleet was in position. The stealth systems had held perfectly. The Empire had no idea what was surrounding them. "He's hailing us," said the communications officer, a young woman named Sergeant Torres. "Put him through," Yara said. The face of Admiral Vortin Kesh appeared on the screen. He was gray-skinned, four-armed, and he had the bearing of a soldier who had given difficult orders all his life. But Yara could see, in the set of his jaw and the way his golden eyes moved, that he was thinking very hard and very fast. "General Ose," he said. He had clearly done his research. "Admiral Kesh," she replied. "Your ships are surrounding my fleet." "Yes," she said. "You have better stealth technology than anything in our records." "Yes," she said again. He was quiet for a moment. "How many ships?" Yara considered. Then she decided honesty was the cleanest path. 1,200 combat vessels and 600 automated defense platforms. Your fleet is inside a sphere of approximately 1,800 weapons systems, all of which are currently aimed at your ships. She watched him absorb that. He was good. His face did not change much. But the four hands, two of which had been resting calmly on the arms of his chair, moved slightly. A very small movement. She had studied humans' chames. No, Imperial officers' body language for years. He was afraid. Good, that meant he was smart. "What do you want?" he asked. "What we said in our first message," Yara said. "We want you to leave. We want the Empire to acknowledge that the Sol system, and all human-claimed space, is sovereign territory, not subject to Imperial authority. We want this acknowledged in writing, filed with the Imperial Senate, and broadcast on the standard Imperial frequency, so that every species in the galaxy can hear it." "That is not something I have the authority to grant," Vortin said. "I know," Yara said, "which is why I'm going to give you the chance to go back and ask the people who do." Vortin was quiet for a long moment. "And if the Empire refuses?" Yara held his gaze. "Then the next fleet they send will need to be considerably larger than this one. And we will still be here. We will still be ready. And they will still lose, Admiral. I am not threatening you. I am telling you what will happen, based on 40 years of very careful planning." She paused. "Your fleet has 240 ships. Each of them is excellent. Each of them is crewed by capable soldiers, following orders they believe in. I do not want to destroy them. I want you to go home." Another silence. Outside in the Sol system, 1,800 human weapons held their lock on 240 Imperial ships, and the stars were cold and quiet, and the planet behind all of them turned slowly in the light of its sun. "You are asking the Empire to retreat," Vortin said, and his voice was very flat and very careful. "I am asking you to survive," Yara said. "There is a difference." Back on the Eternal Rule, Vortin cut the communication and sat in his chair for a long moment. He looked at his bridge crew. Every face was turned toward him. Every eye was on him. These were his people. He had served with some of them for decades. He looked at the tactical display. 37 energy signatures, now identified as sources, surrounding his fleet. And there were probably more that his sensors still could not find. The humans had been honest about their numbers. He found that, somehow, more frightening than if they had lied. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Bren asked. His voice was steady, but his red skin was a shade paler than usual. Vortin thought about the Cathari, the Ven Collective, the Seven Worlds Compact. He thought about what had happened to them. He thought about the difference between courage and foolishness, and whether history made that distinction, or whether it was something you had to decide for yourself, in the moment, with people watching. "Signal the fleet," he said slowly. Hold position. All weapons safeties on. We are not firing. Bren blinked. Admiral. We are not firing, Vortin said again, and his voice was steady. Open a channel to Grand Admiral Seleth. Priority 1. I have a report to make. He had made the decision, and it was, he knew, the most important decision of his career. He was not retreating from the humans. He was retreating toward a truth that the Empire needed to hear. The question was whether the Empire would listen. Given what he knew about the Empire, he was not confident. And that was the problem. Grand Admiral Seleth listened to Vortin's report without interrupting. This was unusual. She was known for her sharp interruptions, the kind that cut to the heart of a problem before the speaker had finished describing it. The fact that she said nothing for the entire length of the report told Vortin, even across the vast distance between them, that she was deeply unsettled. When he finished, she was quiet for a full minute. 1,200 combat vessels, she said at last. Minimum, there may be more that our sensors are still not detecting, and they are surrounding your fleet. Yes, Grand Admiral, and their stealth technology is beyond anything in our records. Their ships vanish from our sensors completely. We had no warning until they chose to show themselves, and even then it was only for 4 seconds. If they had wanted to attack without warning, we would not have had time to respond. Another silence. Vortin waited. On the bridge around him, his officers moved quietly through their duties, keeping the ship running, giving him space. Your recommendation? Seleth asked. Withdraw, Grand Admiral. Return to Imperial space. Bring this information to the Senate and the Emperor. This is not a species that can be handled by a single fleet, or even 2 fleets. They have been preparing for this specific confrontation for decades. They know our ships, our weapons, our tactics. Fighting them here, under these conditions, would not be a battle. It would be an execution. He heard Seleth exhale, a long, careful breath. The Emperor will not be pleased. No, Grand Admiral, he will not. But if I fight here, the Emperor will lose 240 ships, their crews, and any chance of approaching the humans from a position of credibility again. A tactical retreat now at least leaves options open. Vortin, Seleth said, and something in her voice changed, became quieter, more private. I want you to be absolutely clear with me. Are you afraid, or are you right? He thought about it. He thought about it seriously and honestly, the way she deserved. Both, he said finally. I am afraid. That is accurate. I am also right, and I have been afraid before. Grand Admiral, in battles I won, and in battles I lost. Fear is not a disqualification. I am afraid because I understand what I am looking at, and what I am looking at is a species that outmaneuvered us before we arrived. Another long pause. Very well. I will take your recommendation to the Emperor. Hold position. Do not fire. Do not provoke. I will have an answer for you within 48 hours. Understood, Grand Admiral. The channel closed. What Vortin did not know, what he could not have known, was what happened in the Imperial capital over the next 48 hours. He held his fleet in position, surrounded by invisible human ships, and he waited. He did not know that Grand Admiral Seleth brought his report to the Emperor, and that the Emperor, whose name was Vox III, and who had ruled the Empire for 90 years without ever losing a war, listened to the report, and then sat in silence for a very long time. He did not know that Vox III called in the heads of the Imperial military, the chiefs of intelligence, the senior members of the Senate, and that every single one of them, when presented with Vortin's data, went quiet, in the same specific way that people go quiet when a problem is larger than they expected. He did not know that the debate lasted 31 hours, that it went around in circles 6 times, and that in the end, the faction that won was not the one calling for a larger military response, but the one that said something that had almost never been said in the Imperial Senate in 10,000 years of history. Enough. But Vortin would learn all of this later. What he experienced at the end of 48 hours was another order from Seleth, and it was the shortest order he had ever received in his career. It contained just 4 words. Bring your fleet home. He stared at the message for a long time. Then he sat back in his chair and felt something ease in his chest that had been tight since the moment his sensor officer first told him a planet was not in the records. "Signal all ships," he said. "We are withdrawing from this system. Navigation, plot a course back to Imperial space. Best speed." Bren said nothing. His face was unreadable. Pre said nothing either. Most of the bridge crew said nothing. But Vorton noticed that no one looked angry, which told him something about the state of his fleet. Courage was not the same as wanting to die for no reason. Before the fleet turned to leave, Vorton sent one more message to the planet below. "General Osei, our fleet is withdrawing. I recommend you monitor Imperial communications over the next several weeks. There will be discussions at a level I am not part of. I cannot predict their outcome, but I want you to know," he paused, choosing his words, "I want you to know that I came here with the intention of adding your world to the Empire. I leave with a different understanding of the situation. What that understanding means for the future is not my decision to make. I wish you," another pause, "I wish your people well." He cut the channel before she could respond and ordered the fleet to move. In the underground command center on Earth, General Yara Osei watched the Imperial fleet turn and begin its journey back. She watched it go until the last sensor signature faded from the display. Then she sat back in her chair and was quiet for a moment. "They're gone," Torres said from the communications desk. There was something in her voice that was trying not to be relief. "For now," Yara said. "Keep the fleet in position. Full stealth maintained. We watch, we wait, and we listen to what they say when they get home." "Do you think they'll come back?" Dao Lin asked. He had appeared at her shoulder at some point in the last hour. He looked exhausted. They all looked exhausted. Yara thought about the message from Admiral Kesh. The careful, honest words of a man who had expected to win and had instead found himself standing at the edge of something he did not understand. She had read a great deal about how empires behaved when they encountered something they did not understand. Usually they came back with more force, but the Admiral's message had something in it that she had not expected. He had not threatened. He had not promised retribution. He had said, and this was the part she kept turning over in her mind, he had said he left with a different understanding. "Maybe," she said, "but not the same way. And not for a while." She stood up. "In the meantime, we have work to do. The stealth platform network needs expanding. The Ares program is only at 40% completion. The colony worlds need their own defensive grids. We have not won anything yet. We have bought time. We turned back the 7th Grand Fleet," Dao Lin said. "That has never happened." "No," Yara agreed. "It hasn't." She looked at the star map, at the empty space where 240 Imperial ships had been. "But the Empire has 10,000 years of victories behind it. They will regroup. They will analyze what happened here. They will try to understand us." She picked up a cup of cold coffee, looked at it, set it back down. "We have to make sure that when they come back, they understand one thing very clearly." "What's that?" Torres asked from across the room. "That this is not a fluke," Yara said. "That this is not luck, or a trick, or some advantage we stumbled into. This is what humans are. This is what we built, and it will not diminish. It will only grow." She paused, looking at the map. "Tell the fleet to stand down from combat readiness, normal patrol status, and someone get me a fresh cup of coffee. We have a lot more work to do." In the weeks that followed, the Imperial capital was louder than it had been in decades. Not louder in celebration. The Empire had not celebrated in a long time, being the kind of power that took its victories as a matter of course and treated its few setbacks as problems to be quickly corrected. It was louder in argument. Voices in the Senate, voices in the military councils, voices in the great halls where policy was made and unmade. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a plan. What no one had was a good answer. The humans had shown, in a single encounter, that they could match the Empire technologically, outmaneuver it tactically, and do both without losing a single ship. The Empire had sent its 7th Grand Fleet, and the fleet had come home intact but empty-handed, which was the kind of outcome that did not sit comfortably in a culture built on 10,000 years of conquest. But there was something else in those Senate debates, something quieter, that some of the older senators noticed and talked about in private hallways and closed rooms. It was something that had not been said openly in the Imperial Senate in a very long time. What if we don't have to fight them? The humans had not attacked first. They had not fired on the fleet. They had surrounded it, neutralized its threat, and then let it leave. They had sent a message that was, at its core, not a declaration of war but an offer. Leave us alone. Recognize our sovereignty, and we will have no quarrel with you. That was not how subject species behaved. That was not how enemies behaved. That was how equals behaved. And that thought, once it entered the conversation, was very difficult to remove. Grand Admiral Selith, sitting in her private office on the capital world, read the latest intelligence reports on Earth and its growing network of colony worlds and defense installations. The picture that emerged was not of a planet preparing to attack the Empire. It was of a species building a wall, very carefully, very methodically, building it high enough and strong enough that any reasonable power would look at it and decide the cost of breaking through was not worth what lay on the other side. Selith had been in the Empire's military for longer than most species lived. She had seen a great many things, but she had never in her long career seen a species greet the Empire with a wall instead of a weapon and make the wall seem like the more frightening option. She made her recommendation to the Emperor. It was not a popular recommendation. The Emperor, to his credit, listened to it anyway. The Second Fleet left Imperial space 6 weeks after the First had returned. It was twice as large. 490 ships, including 5 super dreadnoughts, and the newest class of warship the Imperial shipyards had produced, vessels called Extinction Class, each one capable of cracking the crust of a planet. There was no Admiral Vorton Kesh at its head. He had been quietly reassigned to an administrative post, which in Imperial terms was a kind of punishment, though the Emperor had stopped short of court-martialing him. The official record said he had made a sound tactical decision under difficult circumstances. The unofficial record said he had blinked, and the Empire did not like blinking. The Second Fleet was commanded by Admiral Darun Vass, a being of hard edges and absolute convictions. He had never lost a battle. He had never retreated. He had a reputation for finding the fastest possible path to victory and walking it without hesitation, and the Emperor had chosen him specifically because of these qualities. What he had not done, in his long and victorious career, was fight a species that had been watching him for decades. On Earth, the monitors picked up the Second Fleet's departure from Imperial space before it had traveled 1/10 of the distance to the Sol system. General Yara Ose looked at the numbers and was quiet for a moment. 490 ships, Dao Lin confirmed. Larger than expected. And the 5 Extinction-class dreadnoughts are concerning. Our modeling suggests each one can sustain fire long enough to cause significant damage even to our strongest platforms. I know, Yara said. What's our status? The Ares program reached 68% completion last week. The new stealth platforms in the outer system are active and tested. Colony world defense grids are operational at Proxima and Kepler. The third-generation warships, the ones with the new drive systems, are at 1,800 vessels. 1,800, Yara said, against 490. We have the numbers. But those Extinction-class ships are a problem. We anticipated them, Dao Lin said, and something in his voice made Yara look at him more carefully. Show me, she said. He led her to a section of the command center she had not visited in several months. A separate room, smaller, with a display system that was more complex than anything in the main operations floor. 3 people were there, 2 men and a woman, all of them with the concentrated, slightly distant look of people who had been working on a single problem for a very long time. This is Project Counterweight, Dao Lin said. We started it the day after we confirmed the Extinction-class dreadnoughts were in the Imperial shipyards. We've known about them for 12 years. We've had 12 years to think about what to do if they showed up. Yara looked at the display. A 3-dimensional model of an Extinction-class dreadnought rotated slowly in the center of the screen, with data flowing around it in columns. She could see the ship's power systems marked in red, its weapons arrays in orange, its shield generators in blue. What did you come up with? She asked. One of the 3, the woman, whose name was Dr. Fen Solari, pointed at the model. She had the calm of someone who had thought about something until it became simple. The Extinction class has one significant vulnerability. Its power distribution network runs through a central hub in the lower core of the ship. The hub itself is very well shielded, but the conduits that connect the hub to the weapon systems are not. They can't be. The power throughput required for the ship's weapons means the conduits have to be large. Large means they're detectable. Detectable means targetable. Targeting them would require getting close, Yara said. Getting close without being seen, Dr. Solari agreed. Which is why we built these. She pulled up a second display. Something small, fast, and almost perfectly invisible to standard sensors. We call them needles. Automated. Carry a single precision warhead. Travel at 0.7 C with full stealth. All 5 Extinction-class ships can be neutralized simultaneously in under 8 seconds. Each one hit in exactly the right spot to shut down its power distribution, without destroying it. Without destroying it, Yara repeated. We don't want to kill the crews, Dr. Solari said simply. We want to win. Those are 2 different things. Yara looked at the needle models for a long moment. Then she nodded. When the fleet arrives, we do this the same way as last time. We let them come to us. We give them the chance to turn back, if they don't take it. We show them what we built, Dao Lin said. The Second Imperial Fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. Admiral Darun Vas was not interested in waiting. He sent no communication, made no offer, asked for no negotiation. He had read Vorton's report and had concluded, correctly, that the report was accurate, but that the response to it had been wrong. He had also concluded, incorrectly, that what had stopped Vorton was a failure of nerve, rather than a sound understanding of the tactical situation. He ordered the fleet to advance at full combat speed. They covered half the distance to Earth in 40 minutes. During those 40 minutes, not a single human ship appeared on their sensors. The system looked exactly as empty as it had when Vorton arrived. Vas took this as confirmation of his theory. The humans had a trick, a good trick, but it required time to set up. They had not had time. They had not expected such a fast approach. He was wrong on all counts. The human fleet had been in position for 6 weeks. At 50 million kilometers from Earth, the communication came. Not from the planet this time. From every direction at once, from the empty space surrounding the fleet, from 100 different sources simultaneously, a single message in perfect Imperial standard. Admiral Vas, you have one opportunity to stop your fleet and withdraw. This offer will not be repeated. Vas dismissed it. He had been briefed on these tactics. He knew the humans would threaten. He had decided before he left Imperial space that threats were answered with action. Continue advance, he ordered. Ignore the communication. Full weapons ready. 8 seconds later, all 5 Extinction-class dreadnoughts went dark. Not explosions, not a blinding destruction. They simply went quiet. Every weapon system offline, every shield down. The great ships still moved. Their basic drive systems were on a separate power circuit, but they were no longer warships. They were, in the space of 8 seconds, very large and very vulnerable pieces of metal. Before Vas could process what had happened, the human fleet appeared. All 1,800 of them, dropping stealth simultaneously, surrounding the Imperial fleet in a sphere that was so precisely positioned, it had clearly been held there for days, and they were not the same ships as before. These were different, the shape of them, the way their engines burned, the way they moved. There was something about them that felt different, even on a sensor display, a quality that experienced soldiers recognized without being able to name. These ships were not here to threaten. They were here to end things. Admiral, said his tactical officer, and his voice was doing the thing voices do when a person is trying very hard to stay professional in a situation that has gone badly wrong. Admiral, I am reading 1,800 human vessels surrounding us. Our 5 Extinction-class ships have lost all combat capability. The human weapon systems are targeting every ship in our fleet simultaneously. I have no recommended countermeasure. Vas sat in his chair. His hands were still. His face was still. He was a man who did not show fear, and he was not showing it now, though the feeling was very present. Another communication, General Osei again. She appeared on his screen looking exactly as she had looked when she had spoken to Vorton. Composed, direct, as if this was a conversation she had rehearsed and was delivering on schedule. Admiral Vas, your Extinction-class ships are disabled. They are not destroyed. The crews are unharmed. Your remaining fleet is targeted, but we have not fired. I am giving you one more opportunity. Stand down. Signal to me that you are standing down, and I will escort your fleet to the edge of the system. All ships, all crews, intact." Vass said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "You disabled 5 Extinction-class dreadnoughts in 8 seconds." "Yes," Yara said. "With what?" "With things we built specifically for that purpose," she said. "Admiral Vass, I do not want to destroy your fleet. I want to send you home. But I need you to understand something very clearly. We have been building for this for 50 years. We have designed weapons for every ship class in the Imperial inventory. We have plans for fleets twice this size. You cannot bring enough ships to this system to change the outcome, because we will simply build more. We are very good at building things." She paused. "Please stand down." Vass looked at his tactical display. His weapon systems were targeting human ships that were targeting him. If he fired, they would fire. If they fired with the precision they had already demonstrated, his fleet would not last long. He thought about Vortin Kesh, sitting in an administrative post somewhere in the Empire, a man who had made the right decision and been quietly punished for it. He thought about the Emperor and the Senate and the 10,000 years of imperial pride that was watching him right now, in the form of the orders in his pocket that said subdue or destroy. He thought about the crews of his fleet, 490 ships, tens of thousands of soldiers who had followed him here because that was their job, because they trusted him. "Stand down," he said. "All ships, stand down." 2 months later, Admiral Vortin Kesh was brought out of his administrative posting and placed on a diplomatic transport. His destination was Earth. His purpose was officially described, in the Imperial documents, as exploratory dialogue regarding mutual interests and boundaries. The language was careful and indirect, which was the language of politics rather than war, and Vortin had spent enough years in the Empire to understand what it meant. It meant the Empire was not ready to say the word negotiation out loud yet, but it was ready to sit in a room with people and talk, which was, in the long history of great powers meeting their limits, usually how things eventually changed. He arrived at Earth on a clear morning, local time. He was taken to a surface facility rather than an underground one, which he noticed, because it meant they were not afraid of him. The facility was on a coast somewhere, with an ocean visible through the windows, and a sky that was remarkably, deeply blue, in a way the skies of the capital world had not been for centuries. General Yara Ose met him at the door. She was shorter than he had expected from the screens. She shook his lower right hand, the formal greeting gesture she had apparently researched beforehand, and led him inside. They sat at a table. There were other people on both sides, aides and advisors and people whose exact roles were not entirely clear, but the conversation, when it began, was between Vortin and Yara. "We were not in your records," she said, after the formal preliminary words had been completed. "No," he said. "We made sure of that. For a long time we weren't ready to be found. We needed the time." She looked at him directly. "We are ready now." "Ready for what?" he asked. "For the galaxy," she said simply. "Not as a subject world, not as a conquest, as what we are." "And what are you?" he asked. He was genuinely curious. He had been asking himself this question for months. She thought about it for a moment, which he appreciated. She could have had an answer ready, something polished and diplomatic. She took the question seriously instead. "We are a species that is very hard to kill," she said finally, "and very hard to frighten, and very, very good at being ready." She paused. "We'd like to be part of a galaxy that doesn't require those qualities. But we will not stop having them." Vortin was quiet for a moment. Outside, through the windows, the blue ocean moved. "The Empire has not negotiated with an equal in 10,000 years, he said. "I know," Yara said. "That must feel strange." "Yes," he admitted. "It does." "Get used to it," she said. And it was not unkind. It was simply honest. The talks lasted 3 weeks. They were difficult and slow, and full of moments where either side could have walked away. There were things the Empire demanded that Earth refused entirely, and things Earth asked for that the Empire could not yet accept. There were arguments that went in circles for days. There were silences that lasted hours. But at the end of 3 weeks, there was a document. It was not a treaty of submission. It was not a declaration of war. It was, in the carefully chosen language of its authors, a framework of coexistence, which acknowledged the sovereignty of the Sol system and all human-claimed space, established regular diplomatic contact between Earth and the Imperial Senate, and created, for the first time in 10,000 years of Imperial history, a formal boundary beyond which the Empire agreed not to act without consent. When it was signed, Vorton sat back and looked at the document for a long moment. "This will change things," he said. "Yes," Yara agreed. "Other species will hear about this. They will see that the Empire can be stopped, that it can sign documents like this one." "Yes," she said again, "they will. You knew that. When you planned all of this, you knew that this was not just about Earth." Yara looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded, just once. "We have been watching the galaxy for 50 years, Admiral. We have watched what the Empire does to species that have no one standing beside them. We cannot fight every battle in the galaxy, but we can demonstrate, clearly and once, that the Empire can be met at an equal table." She held his gaze. What other species do with that demonstration is up to them. He understood then, fully, what he was looking at. Not just a species defending itself, a species that had decided, quietly and deliberately, to change the shape of the galaxy, not through conquest. They could have tried that, with 1,800 ships and weapons capable of disabling Extinction-class dreadnoughts in 8 seconds. Not through dominance, through example. He thought about that the whole way home, in the transport ship crossing the long dark between Earth and the Imperial capital. He thought about the blue planet, and the underground room, and the woman who had planned 50 years to sit at a table as an equal. He thought about the species that had hidden in the records gap, and built and built and built in the darkness, not to strike first, but to be ready, not to conquer, but to stand. In the years that followed, things did change. Slowly, and not without difficulty, but they changed. Other species in the galaxy found out about what had happened in the Sol system. Fragments at first, rumors. Things passed quietly between diplomatic channels and intelligence services, and the hushed conversations of ambassadors who had heard something interesting. Then, as the framework of coexistence became known, and its existence could not be denied, the story spread. A species had said no to the Empire, and the Empire had signed a document. What that meant for the future of 10,000 years of imperial expansion was something that historians would debate for centuries. But on Earth, in a coastal facility where the ocean was very blue and the sky was the same color, General Yara Ose sat at the end of a long day and looked out the window and thought that they had done what they had set out to do. They had bought time, for themselves, for others. And time, as anyone who had ever spent 50 years planning for a conversation knew, was the most valuable thing in the universe. She picked up her coffee. It was cold. She drank it anyway. There was still a great deal of work to do.